Hello, and welcome to Improbable Things. I'm J. Grace Pennington, and this is my podcast where I share 6 improbable thoughts before breakfast. So I've got my 6 things down. Sorry about my voice. I've been having allergies, but hopefully it's not too miserable to listen to because I am ready to get started. Well, so much for getting this done earlier in the week. It's been a bit of a busy week again, and mostly the evenings are what is busy, and so then I, just go to bed really tired and wake up wanting a little bit more sleep. And so, yes, but I am going to see next time about doing it earlier in the week, but the important thing is that I'm getting it done. So anyway, number 1, I wanted to continue to share a little bit about the rewriting on Firmament Eleftheria. And I have been working on it really consistently, but it is, as usual, going a little slower than I had hoped. Even though I type fast, it still does take time to retype an entire story. But again, I really am glad I'm doing that way because it helps me, like for instance, even just coming to a sentence or a paragraph that needs to be reworked a little, it helps just to start over in a sense, even if I'm looking at the printed manuscript as a guide that I often follow very closely, it's still easier for me to just redo it than to go into something that's there and try to be messing with it and picking it apart. So I am glad I'm doing it that way, but it is definitely time consuming. So I'm going to try to start finding some more time in the day and thinking, okay, what else, what other hobby am I indulging in that I could be okay, this is going to take a break for a week or 2 here while I finish up these rewrites. So I really want to get this book out there. But it is going well. I am really happy with the rewriting I've done so far. And the more I go over this, the more excited I am to share it with y'all, hopefully very soon. Well, number 2, one thing that I am having to do, and honestly, this is one of the most time-consuming things, is just filling in the small details or checking small details, things that I hadn't bothered with the first time around because it is so time-consuming and I just wanted to get the first draft out. So a couple of examples. One is just filling in blanks. I'll leave, not a ton, but there will be a few places in the story where I just leave a blank because I don't want to take the time right now to think of a name or a place or whatever I need there. So for instance, a character was talking about where she met her husband, and she was like, oh yes, when I met him and I just put a blank station, so on the blank station, whatever. And then I went back, I'm like, okay, now I have to actually think of a name for this space station, and I want it to make sense with, the names of the other things that I've done so far in this world, etc. Or things like checking the timeline. So I'm trying to think. There's different examples. One is the timeline within the story where I have to be okay, I said they had 2 days to get here, but oh look, wait, it took them 4 days if you actually go back and look at, the time that's passed. Or it might be things like she'll make a reference to how long she's lived on the ship and how old she was when they moved there, and I have to go back and check. Thankfully, I do have a document that's the whole timeline for basically everything that has happened in the lives of all these people. And so I can just go to that document and check and be okay, they moved here in this year, and this is the year she was born, make sure that it's good. But that stuff does take a lot of time. And it's not like actual writing. It's not really the fun part. But that has to be done. Obviously, I can't send it out still with blanks or with inconsistent timelines. So, gotta do it. Well, number 3, I got to do some beta reading for my friend Rachel Newhouse earlier, I guess it was a couple weeks ago at this point, but anyway, I got to do some beta reading for her newest book that is releasing soon, and it was so much fun. I honestly don't do much beta reading anymore because, again, it's hard to find the time, but when I have done it, I really enjoy it, and I think, it's kind of like the part that I love about editing in my own books without having to do the real actual work. I can just nitpick it, and the same kind of notes I would make for myself, and then just send it to someone off okay, here you go, do all this. And so it's weirdly satisfying. And I do feel that I've studied stories so much that I think I have a pretty good sense for when something's off not all, that doesn't always translate to how to do it right, but I do think that my comments are able to be useful to other writers. And so I really enjoy, because I appreciate feedback so much on my stories. So being able to do that for somebody else is just super satisfying. And I'm really glad I got to do it. I'm planning to do some more for her as well, and really looking forward to it. Well, number 4, I just wanted to say that I really need more bookshelves, and I'm not exactly sure how that's going to happen. I was thinking it through a bunch yesterday because I was cleaning up my girls' room, and they have a bookshelf in their room, but it is like 100% full, and they really like books, and they're obviously going to get more books. Like, they're still very little. They have a lot more time to get books. And just like, where are we going to put more books? They have a shelf in their room that's like really narrow because it was made to fit in a specific place. It's like, or it's not narrow, it's like, it's only like 6 inches deep. And so a lot of books won't fit on there, but I'm like, okay, I need to find what other books I can put on there to make some more space. And then I'm like, where else? Like, the room is pretty small already. Like, our house is just not that big, but already I myself also have like piles of books that have overflowed the bookshelf. So I'm just like, where can I either like build some shelves on the wall somewhere, or find some shelves that are either like really narrow or really short that can like fit in odd places, because we just need more bookshelves. And so anyway, trying to have to figure out that solution. I'm sure all of the other book lovers out there know that the struggle is just so real. And I'm thinking there's a couple spots in our office here in the house where we have windows, and the windows, are maybe like, I don't know, 2.5 feet, something like that. I'm really bad with measurements, but anyway, something like that from the floor. So I'm like, okay, maybe some like really short shelves that can go underneath the windows. Like, I don't know, but we need to figure something out, because all these books need a home, and all the books that we're going to get in the future need a home. And number 5, speaking of books, I'm currently reading, for my book club, we're reading a book called This Tender Land. I'm not that far into it yet. Still like, not even like a quarter of the way through, I don't think, which the book club is in less than a week now, so I better get moving. But anyway, it's been really interesting so far. It definitely is pulling me in, so I'm definitely interested to read the rest, and it does seem promising as far as, a good discussion at book club. So we'll see how it goes. But one thing I'm noticing is there's just so many bad things happening. Like, these poor characters, they're young boys in like the Depression era who are orphans, and so they've been taken in by a school for Indian children, and the people that run it are horrible, and just all these horrible things are happening, and it just seems like they cannot catch a break. Like, something's about to go right and it doesn't. So instead something horrible happens, and I'm just like, oh my goodness. And I know I talked about this to an extent last week when I was talking about the show Angel, but it just has got me thinking, like, how much bad stuff is too much bad stuff? Because again, I'm not that far in the book, so I'm sure it's going to have its ups and downs, and I'm not saying it's too much yet, but it just makes me wonder, like, at a certain extent, like, you are reading for enjoyment. So obviously, hopefully the bad things that happen have some redeeming quality later, where you can, it makes like, that's what I love about Lord of the Rings, is that it's obviously very dark, but that to me makes the hope shine through, even stronger, because we want that hope for the really dark things in our lives. So, hopefully this book is something like that, but I'm also like, you do have to be able to enjoy the journey too. So at what point are you going to lose the reader because they're just like, I cannot handle like any more bad stuff happening? And I know that's the other thing, is that all readers are different. Some people are going to have a much different threshold. So, know your own audience, and you're not going to make everyone happy. But I do think there's something to be said for the fact that you need to have some enjoyment of the ride. And I'm not saying I don't for this book. It's just got me thinking, but I'm sure I'll have more updates as I read more of it. It's a pretty like hefty book, so, but like I said, I need it read in less than a week. So I read Dune in 5 days, so surely I can do this. But yeah, lots of bad things happening so far to these poor kids. Number 6, speaking of really bad things happening in stories, my husband and I watched the first part of Stranger Things season 4 over like the past week, and we binged it pretty quickly because this is super intense, so we really enjoyed it. I say enjoyed it with a caveat because it's so gory. Like, I can't really recommend it without knowing the person I'm talking to and their comfort level, because it was definitely way, 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 way too gory for me. I could never watch it by myself, but I was able to watch it because my husband was there and he could kind of like when I would close my eyes, because obviously something horrible is happening, and he could tell me when to open them again because it was really awful. But anyway, that was not what I was going to talk about with it. It was totally worth it for me to get through all of that awful gore and just like scary stuff and whatever. Because for one thing, overall, the writing is just like spectacular. They've done a great job with the characters. I was very skeptical because I'm like, season 4, really? And one thing I've noticed is like the last 3 seasons, they were all good, but they kind of kept just like one-upping with the bad guy, where it's like, okay, and now it's something even bigger and worse, and now it's even something bigger and worse, and it's like, well, you can only do that so many times before you run out of like room for it to get any bigger, any worse. And so I will say they did a good job with that this time, where instead of making it just like bigger, they went kind of a different direction. And I think that was a really smart move, where it's something very different than we've dealt with, even though it's, still connected. So that was good. But really the ultimate thing that just had me like nerding out hugely as a writer and as a lover of stories was all the setups and payoffs. And I'm sure I've talked about that on this podcast before, because it's one of my favorite things when a story does really well. But it's just that sort of thing where like there might even be just like an offhand comment or something you see or something small in the story that later, when it comes to fruition, you can look back and go, oh yes, it makes so much sense, and you get that sort of satisfaction of the bookends between the setup and the payoff. And it's just one of the greatest feelings in the world to me as a storyteller. But I do think it's a hard balance. And as a writer, this is the balance I really struggle with when I try to do that, because I love it so much when it's done well. But it's like, if you do it too, if you're too heavy-handed with it, then it's the development's going to be obvious, and obviously you want to surprise your readers. Like, you don't want them to see everything that's coming. But on the other hand, it can't be so obtuse that it's like you can't even make the connections. You know what I mean? Like, you can't be like so subtle that people are not going to pick up on it and it's going to be confusing and be like, where did that come from? Like, you want it to be just obvious enough, or you just want it to stick in their mind enough where they're like, okay, yes, I remember that thing that came up before, and so that led to this. And so, like, it makes sense now. I feel like you just want the reader, the viewer, whatever, to have that it all makes sense moment in their head. And so you have to have like just the right amount of laying the groundwork before that moment. Not too much, not too little. Like, it just has to be in that Goldilocks zone. And I admire seeing that done well so much. And they did a great job with it with this, where there's a lot of things that like don't make sense, or you're like, how is this connected to anything? And then when they do bring those connections to fruition, you can see how it all connects. You can see, this actually led to that, etc. Excuse me, sorry. And it was just an absolutely brilliant moment. And so, yeah, really a huge fan of that. And I really hope that, I always feel that definitely watching and reading things that do it well